The belief that government has both the responsibility and the power to promote equality of income has become an article of religious faith. It takes about as much daring these days to question the virtues of egalitarianism as it used to take to question the virtues of motherhood. Like most religious beliefs, and the reason why it is to be called a religious belief, this one is unexamined and preached rather more than it is practiced. You all recall that Thomas Jefferson, when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." If you were to stop there and think about those words, you would say, well, what utter nonsense. How can any man as intelligent, as knowledgeable, as worldly as Thomas Jefferson write such an obviously invalid sentence? Not only aren't all men created equal, all people aren't men. And what about the women? Some men are born tall, some are short, some are strong, some are weak, some are smart, some are stupid. But obviously, Thomas Jefferson did not mean that men are created equal in the literal sense, that they are clones of one another. That isn't what he meant. And that becomes obvious if you don't stop the reading of the Declaration of Independence at that point, but go on to read the sentences that follow. And what follows that statement in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal," it continues, "that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." What Thomas Jefferson and the Founding Fathers were saying when they said all men are created equal is not at all an assertion about their genetic composition or their physical characteristics. It was rather an assertion that they were equal before the law, that they were equal in the eyes of God, that each person is precious in and of himself, that each person separately is to be taken seriously as a human being in and of himself, and is not to be treated simply as a means for the purpose of serving somebody else's ends. Equality, even in that sense, of course, the Founding Fathers were preaching what they were not practicing, as they were well aware, because that concept of equality was, of course, inconsistent with slavery. Now, equality of rights in this sense gets meaning precisely because people are not equal in tastes, in values, in capacities. It's precisely because people are not equal that we have to stress that people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because people are unequal and different, each will view his happiness as lying in a different area. Each will have different values. He will hold different things high. And if each separately is to be regarded as an end in himself, it is essentially necessary that he be given the opportunity to pursue those differences and to satisfy his tastes and values and not somebody else. Equality in this sense, equality of rights, personal equality, is a precondition of permitting human freedom. That's the original, I believe, and the most important sense of equality. But there are two other senses which it has been given, which need attention. The second, the most widely discussed sense of equality is the notion of equality of opportunity. All of us are accustomed to saying, well, of course, men aren't equal, but they should run a fair race. We want people to have equality of opportunity. Now, in any literal sense, that's just as impossible as is physical genetic equality. I have one child who is born with sight, and another child who is born blind. What can it mean to say that they shall have equality of opportunity? Their opportunities are unequal. I have children who are born in the United States of America, a great country, a wealthy country with many openings. I have children who are born, let us say, in India, or in China, or in Russia, or in any one of a dozen other places in the world. What can it possibly mean to say that their opportunities are equal? Within a single country, some children are lucky enough to have parents who are concerned about them, who give them a background of culture and understanding and schooling and education. Other children are born so unfortunate as not to have the same quality of parents. There is no way in any literal sense you can achieve equality of opportunity. And yet, the concept has a meaning and a significance. What we really mean by it, I believe, is not the literal sense that people shall have equal opportunities, because that's impossible. What we really mean is something else. The meaning of equality of opportunity in this sense is that there shall be no arbitrary obstacles placed to prevent people from achieving those careers, those positions, those opportunities for which they have the ability and the capacity and the taste to qualify. In that sense, equality of opportunity, as we shall see, is also a necessary condition for freedom, in the sense that there shall be no arbitrary obstacles preventing people from developing their capacities. But I come to the third sense, and the one which is the one most widely used today. And that's the notion of equality in the sense of equality of outcome. Equality of outcome is clearly inconsistent and contradictory to equality of opportunity of the kind we've just been talking about. Let me illustrate that in a rather silly and trivial way. A group of us get together to play a game of poker. Equality of outcome means that after the game is over, you have to redistribute the money so everybody ends with the same amount. Well, that takes all the fun out of the game. And it also completely denies the idea that at the outset, everybody shall have the opportunity to do the best he can. If everybody is to end up in the same place, to have the same outcome after the event, what does it mean to say that people shall have equality of opportunity to achieve as much as they can in terms of their capacities? So equality of outcome, is clearly inconsistent with any appropriate concept of equality of opportunity. But beyond that, it is an even more difficult concept to define precisely than are the other concepts, equality of rights or equality of opportunity in the sense of no arbitrary obstacles. Religious beliefs have the characteristic that they tend to be unexamined. And that is the case with this concept of equality. We have many, many people preaching the religion of equality. They haven't even thought, they haven't begun to examine what do they mean by the equality of output. I want to turn from that to the next question, the question about the relation between equality in this sense of equality of outcome and other values that we hold. Because while people might say, gee, I'd like to see a more equal distribution of incomes, we might find that lovely, we might find it pleasing. All of us will also say, but after all, we have other values. We would also like to see people have high incomes. We want not only equality, but we want an adequate level of income. And so we have to ask, how does equality relate to efficiency? We also want to have not only equality, but also justice. How does equality relate to justice? We also want to have not only equality, but human freedom. How are those related? And I want to turn now to the question of these relationships. The free market, a system of voluntary cooperation among people through the market, achieves efficiency in the utilization of resources only if the people who operate in that market are paid, receive a reward in accordance with their contribution to the total output. Here is the information, the signal has gone out that the society would like to have some more blue jeans. And here's a man whose greatest skill, he's very skilled in making blue jeans, but he's now perfectly happy doing something else. Why should he move? Well, the price system leads him to move if he is rewarded, if he gets an income in accordance with the value of what he produces. In that case, he can get a higher income by going and producing blue jeans than he can get by wherever he is now. So, a free market will produce efficiency only insofar as those who cooperate in the free market are paid in accordance with the value of what they add in the market, according to their product. Payment in accordance with product is a principle that is absolutely essential to achieve efficiency in a free market. Now, equality and this principle of efficiency does not bear a one-way relationship. There are some measures which will promote both equality and efficiency. The concept of equality in the sense of a career open to the talents, in the sense that there shall be no obstacles, no arbitrary obstacles. The removal of such obstacles will promote both efficiency and equality. If I have had the rule that only people who are born from certain classes in society shall be able to hold certain classes of jobs, and that's an arbitrary obstacle, the removal of that obstacle will promote both equality by giving greater opportunity to a wider class of people, and efficiency by enabling people to use their resources more efficiently and more effectively than they otherwise could. But those government measures that reduce the relationship between reward and output interfere with efficiency. They destroy the incentive for people to use resources most effectively. Those measures that widen equality of opportunity will promote efficiency. Those that introduce a difference between product and reward will reduce efficiency. The same thing is true about the relationship between equality and justice. Justice is in the eye of the beholder. There is no absolute standard of justice. There is no way to define justice. One man's notion of justice is not the same as another man's notion of justice. Because if justice were self-evident and identical to everybody, there would be no problem. But the point is that if I am going to put justice above everything, then the only way that can work out is through a war among alternative meanings of justice. It's almost impossible to agree about justice, but you can come closer to agreeing about what is clear injustice. And here it's easier to agree about how to avoid clear injustice. And here, equality of treatment equality of outcome, is sometimes required in order to avoid injustice. It is unjust for two people who are essentially in the same position to be treated differently. Equals should be treated equally. And that kind of injustice can only be avoided by equality. However, equality may also conflict. It is unjust if a thief and his victim are treated equally. Unequal treatment is needed for justice. It is unjust for a lazy man and a hard worker to be rewarded equally. Justice there requires difference. But the most important conflict, and the one I really want to stress, because I believe it is a fundamental one, is the conflict between equality and liberty. Equality in the sense of equality before the law, in Thomas Jefferson's sense, is a precondition for freedom and liberty. But imposed equality of outcome clearly conflicts with liberty. You can bring that out most clearly by taking the extreme case. Suppose everybody was going to end up having the same amount of goods and services regardless what happened. Everybody was going to have the same amount of food, the same amount of clothing, the same amount of housing. How would it be decided who would do what work? How do you, under those circumstances, allocate jobs? Who sweeps the streets? Who directs the traffic? Who teaches the classes? Who flies the airplanes? If everybody's going to end up being exactly equal, you're not going to have very many volunteers for sweeping streets. And I suspect there might be one or two other jobs for which you would not have many volunteers. It is obvious that if everybody is going to end up equally, then only coercion and force, order, command, could assign people to jobs. But then what happens to the equality you started with? Is the man who gives orders equal to the man who takes the orders? Are you not in that wonderful position that George Orwell described so well in Animal Farm, in which everybody is equal, but some are more equal than others? Perfect equality is a myth that you cannot achieve complete equality without utterly destroying liberty, without destroying freedom. That inequality of outcome, a final product, is in many cases the other side of freedom. Now, once you put it this way, it becomes absolutely clear that, people don't really want equality of outcome. That's a bunch of nonsense. People may talk as if they want equality of outcome, as if they are egalitarians, but nobody believes it. If the people who preached equality really wanted equality, there is nothing in the world that would prevent each one of them achieving the objective himself. If he thinks you ought to have equality in the country as a whole, the statistics are available for him to figure out the average income every man in the country has, on the average. And if he has more than that, for him to take the excess and distribute it. He will be achieving equality. He will be making his own contribution to equality. If he believes that what you ought to have is equality world over, well, then he could keep $75 or $100 or $200 a year for himself and give the rest around the world to deserving objects of charity. If I ask today, what are the major sources of poverty for the disadvantaged in this country? If you examine that question, you will find that the major sources, the major creator of poverty has been the U.S. government and local governments. If I take the class that is most noted, that we are likely to talk about, in what respect are the poor in the center ghettos of our big cities most disadvantaged? In what respect are the poor blacks worst off? There is no doubt what the answer is. The respect they are most disadvantaged is in the kind of schooling they can get. Why? Because the schools are run by the government. First of all, we give them a whammy in not letting them get decent training to have skills to work, and then we say, you don't have good skills, you aren't worth much in the marketplace. We want to make sure you are really not getting jobs, and so we will impose a minimum wage rate that will make sure that you're not worth anybody's while to hire. It requires an employer to discriminate against anybody who has low skills. So our government schools give them low skills, and our government minimum wage laws deny them a job to get on-the-job training. Our government laws promote and defend the restrictive practices of trade unions, which have been another source of reduced opportunity to improve their lot on the part of low-income groups. We have a welfare system in the United States which has encouraged people to stay in the area of poverty, to become poor and to stay poor. The alleged intentions are excellent, but the actual outcome is very different from the intentions. So on the one end, governmental programs, many enacted in the name of helping the poor, have in fact been a source of poverty for the disadvantaged. My final conclusion: any society that puts equality ahead of freedom will end up with neither equality nor freedom. Any society that puts equality before freedom will end up with neither. On the other hand, a society that puts freedom first will, as a happy byproduct, end up both with greater freedom and greater equality. It will be a byproduct, but it will not be an accident. It will not be an accident because a free society releases the energies and the abilities of people to pursue their own objectives. It thus prevents some people from arbitrarily holding down other people. It thus prevents people from achieving positions of privilege and maintaining it permanently. So a society that puts freedom first will, by no accident, but as a happy byproduct, achieve, in my opinion, both greater freedom and greater equality. Thank you.